His hand trembled, but his grip never loosened. The knife grazed my skin cold, sharp, real. "Sign it," he growled, eyes wild, breath sour with rage. I reached for the pen with fingers that barely obeyed. How did we get here? How did the boy I once cradled become the man threatening my life for a piece of land? The papers lay open on the kitchen table. He pushed them forward with the blade. One wrong word, 1 second of hesitation, and I knew he might use it. If you want to know what happens next, stay with me until the end of the video. And if you still believe deep in your heart that God is always watching over you, silently arranging everything, then right now, leave a comment saying AMEN below this video. Because who knows, at the very moment you write those words, a blessing may quietly enter your life. I often wonder how a life can be measured. Is it by the years we live, or by the moments we endure? I am 69 years old now, living in the same modest house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where I raised my 2 children. Every creak of these wooden floors carries a memory. Every photo on the wall whispers a story. Sometimes, when I sit alone at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, I can almost hear the echoes of laughter that used to fill this house. My name is Linda Parker. For most of my life, I believed that hard work and love could hold a family together, that sacrifice was enough to keep our home strong. I came from simple people, farmers who knew how to rise before dawn, to till the soil, to put food on the table with calloused hands. My late husband and I built this life piece by piece. He has been gone for years now, but his spirit lingers in every corner of this house. I kept going because I had our children, Jason and Sarah. Jason was my firstborn. From the moment I held him in my arms, I thought he was my blessing, my legacy. He was a bright, strong boy with eyes that could melt my heart. I used to imagine him growing into a man of honor, someone who would protect this family when I grew old. That is what mothers do. We dream for our children, even when reality turns out so different. Sarah, my youngest, is the gentlest soul I have ever known. She is a schoolteacher now, patient and kind, the sort of daughter who gives more than she takes. She had opportunities. She could have gone to a bigger city, pursued her career, built her own life, but she stayed here in Cedar Rapids. She told me she couldn't leave me alone, not with my health and not after everything that happened with Jason. I told her she didn't need to carry my burdens, but in her quiet way, she already does. This house, the land it sits on, has always been more than property to me. It is where my children took their first steps, where we carved pumpkins on chilly October nights, where we gathered around the table for Thanksgiving prayers. The walls have absorbed every argument and every reconciliation. The soil in the backyard holds the roots of trees planted by my husband's hands. Losing it would be like losing the last piece of myself. But lately, shadows have crept into our lives. Jason is 35 now, and instead of the man I dreamed he would become, he has fallen into a darkness I cannot seem to pull him from. Gambling, drinking, living on promises and debts. He was once the boy who brought me dandelions from the yard, who swore he would take care of me when I grew old. Now, he is a man who brings fear into my home, a man I barely recognize. I have paid his debts more times than I can count, sold heirlooms, drained savings, begged for mercy from men I should never have had to meet. Each time, I told myself it would be the last. Each time, I prayed he would change. But prayers, it seems, do not always reach lost souls. Sarah watches me with worry in her eyes. She doesn't say it outright, but I know she resents the way I keep forgiving Jason. She doesn't understand that a mother's heart is a complicated thing, part love, part hope, part denial. No matter how many times he breaks me, I still see the little boy who once called me Mommy with such trust. And that memory is a chain I cannot break. The neighbors whisper. Some pity me, others scold me behind closed doors for letting Jason drag me down. My closest neighbor, Thomas Reed, a 70-year-old veteran, often stops by to check on me. He is kind, though blunt. Linda, he says, land is not just dirt, it's family. Don't let that boy take it away from you. I nod politely, but my heart twists inside. Thomas doesn't understand that it isn't as simple as saying no. Jason is my son, my flesh and blood, and though he frightens me now, I cannot bring myself to turn my back on him completely. It was late autumn when the air grew sharp, and the leaves began to fall in golden heaps across the yard. Thanksgiving was approaching, a holiday meant to bring families together, to remind us of gratitude and blessings. But instead of feeling peace, I felt dread. I sensed a storm coming, though I did not yet know how violent it would be. There are nights when I lie awake in my bed, listening to the silence, wondering where I went wrong. Did I spoil Jason too much? Did I fail to discipline him? Or was it something beyond my control, the cruel hand of fate? At my age, questions become heavier because the time to find answers grows shorter. I am Linda Parker, and this is the story of how love, loyalty, and betrayal nearly tore my family apart. It is the story of how a mother can endure pain deeper than she ever thought possible. And it begins, as all tragedies do, with the smallest cracks in the foundation of what was once a strong and loving home. They say a mother knows. We're supposed to have that instinct, that unshakable feeling when something's wrong with our children. But I didn't see it. Or maybe I didn't want to see it. It began subtly, the way rot spreads beneath a surface before the wood gives out completely. Jason would disappear for hours, sometimes days, and when he returned, he was distracted and edgy. He stopped shaving. His once clean clothes smelled of stale beer and smoke. At first I thought maybe it was stress. He'd lost his job at the hardware store during the pandemic, and though he said he was figuring things out, nothing ever materialized. Then came the first knock at my door. It was a warm afternoon in April. I was watering the marigolds along the front porch when a silver sedan pulled up to the curb. Two men stepped out, both in dark jackets, both with cold, rehearsed smiles. "Mrs. Parker?" one of them asked as he approached. "Yes? We're looking for Jason Parker. We were hoping you could let him know he's past due on a personal loan. Quite a bit past due, actually." I remember blinking at him, still holding the hose, the water pooling uselessly on the concrete. "I'm sorry, I don't know anything about that." Well, he listed this address. And if he's not here, someone's going to have to help him out. He owes $12,000. My knees nearly buckled. I turned off the hose. "There must be a mistake." "There's no mistake, ma'am. We'll be back in a week. Maybe he'll be in a better position by then." They walked away like salesmen who'd just handed me a flyer. That night, I sat Jason down in the kitchen, the same kitchen where I used to serve him grilled cheese sandwiches when he came home from school. "What are you into, Jason?" I asked gently. He looked away. "It's just a loan, Mom. Nothing big. I'm handling it. 12,000 is not nothing. I've got a plan. I'll pay it back." "Jason, these men, they weren't from a bank. They didn't seem legal." He laughed bitterly. "Legal people don't help guys like me." That sentence stuck with me. Guys like me. When had my son started thinking of himself like that? A week later, they came again. This time, they didn't knock. They sat in their car for nearly an hour, parked across the street, staring at our house. Sarah noticed them first when she came over after work. "Mom," she whispered, pulling me away from the window. "What the hell is going on?" I lied. "It's nothing, just someone looking for directions." But she knew. She always knew more than she let on. Eventually, I did what I always did. I stepped in. I used the money I'd saved from my late husband's pension, money I'd put aside in case my health worsened. I paid them off. $12,000. Gone in one morning. Jason was grateful for about 5 minutes. "Thanks, Mom," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. "I'll make it up to you. I swear." I wanted to believe him. I told myself this was the bottom, and he would climb up from here. I was wrong. 2 months later, another man showed up. This one wasn't slick. He was angry. He kicked the side gate open and screamed Jason's name until I came outside. "You tell your piece of shit son, he owes me 20 grand now," he shouted in front of the whole neighborhood. "He's running out of time." I could see curtains pulling back in the neighboring houses. I felt exposed, like my entire life was unraveling right there on the lawn. I begged the man to lower his voice. I told him Jason wasn't home, which was true. He never was anymore. Sarah was livid when she found out. "Mom, this is getting dangerous," she said, her voice shaking. "He's not just in trouble, he's dragging you down with him." "I'm fine," I lied again. "It's just a phase." "It's not a phase. He's a grown man with a gambling problem. And he's got people threatening you at your own front door. Sarah wanted me to press charges, to at least talk to the police. But how could I do that to my own son? He's still my boy, I told her. He's not acting like your boy, she snapped, then softened when she saw the tears in my eyes. Sarah meant well, she always had. But she didn't understand how mothers operate. We don't let go, not truly. Even when our children hurt us, we still reach for them. The days blurred together. Jason would come and go, often smelling of whiskey, his eyes red-rimmed. He stopped sleeping in his old room, started crashing at friends' places or wherever he could drink in peace. But every so often, he'd show up, asking for a little help. I gave it. Not because I could afford to, but because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't. One night, I heard him outside, arguing on the phone in the driveway. I peered through the blinds and caught fragments. I'll get it. Just give me one more week. No, I'm good for it. She's old. She'll sign it. Trust me. She'll sign it. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. But soon, I would. And when that moment came, when he stood in my kitchen holding a knife not to stab, but to threaten, I would realize the boy I raised was long gone. He had turned into someone else. Someone who saw me not as his mother, but as a signature. A name on a deed. A way out. I used to believe there was a line Jason would never cross. No matter how far he drifted, no matter how lost he became, I clung to the hope that some part of the boy I raised still lived inside him. That hope, however foolish, was the only thing keeping my heart from collapsing in on itself. But that line, whatever it was, faded completely one Thursday evening in early November. It was just after 5. The sun had barely dipped behind the rooftops, casting long shadows through the bare trees. I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of lentil soup, trying to bring a little warmth into the house. Sarah was working late at the school for parent-teacher conferences. The quiet was comforting, at least for a little while. Then I heard the front door slam open. Heavy footsteps, quick, unstable. I turned, and there he was, Jason. His coat was half off, eyes wild, red, and tired. He reeked of cigarettes and something sour, like stale beer and sweat. In his hand, I saw a thick envelope. "Where is it?" he barked. I froze. "Where's what, Jason?" "The deed, Mom. The papers. The house. The land. I know you keep them in that cabinet. Just get them." I stepped back, my spoon trembling in my hand. "What are you talking about? Why would you need those?" "Because I found someone who can clear my debt, but they want collateral. Just temporary. Just until I pay them back. You still trust me, right?" I said nothing. That silence must have broken something in him. His face twisted. "You don't trust me anymore, do you?" "Jason, listen to yourself. You're not thinking clearly. This isn't the way." He threw the envelope on the table. It spilled out across the wood forms, a pen, even a notary stamp. "It's all ready, Mom. Just sign it. I've already filled out your name. We can make it official. Tonight." My knees went weak. You forged my name?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer. "I need you to finish it. Just a signature. You owe me that much." "Owe you?" I whispered, voice barely audible. "All the years I've been struggling, you were supposed to be there. But you gave up on me. Now I have to fix this myself." The pain in my chest began to pulse, slow and deep. "Jason," I said carefully, "you're scaring me." Then came the moment I'll never forget. He reached into his coat and pulled out a knife. A kitchen knife. From my own drawer. He didn't wave it wildly. He didn't scream. That almost made it worse. He held it low, calm, like he'd thought about this. "I don't want to hurt you, Mom," he said softly. "But I need this. I need you to sign." I backed away, nearly stumbling into the table. "Jason, put that down. It's just for show. You know that. I'd never really..." He stopped, and that pause was more terrifying than anything else, because in that split second, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Not doubt about the knife. Doubt about whether he would use it. "Please," I begged. "Think about Sarah. Think about what you're doing. She's not the one they're coming after. It's me," he snapped. At that moment, the front door creaked again. "Mom?" Sarah's voice. I turned my head toward the entryway, heart racing. Jason lunged forward, grabbing my arm. No, don't tell her anything, just sign it. His grip was tight. The knife hovered between us. Jason! Sarah screamed. What the hell are you doing? Let go of her! She rushed into the room, but Jason shoved me aside and stepped between us. It's none of your business, Sarah. Stay out of this. Are you insane? You're threatening our mother with a knife. I'm trying to fix this, he shouted. Nobody gets it. I didn't want to do this, but you're both leaving me no choice. Put it down, she said, voice trembling. Please, you're scaring her. You're scaring me. Jason stood there, breathing hard, eyes flicking between us. Then, slowly, he lowered the knife. But the damage was done. I'll sign, I whispered. My voice was dry and cracking, like old paper. Mom, no. Sarah grabbed my arm. You don't have to. I do, I said quietly. He won't stop. And I can't live like this anymore. My hands shook as I picked up the pen. I couldn't feel my fingers. I couldn't even read the words. I just signed. And with that, everything I'd built. All the sacrifices, the nights working double shifts, the years raising 2 children alone, it all transferred to my son with the flick of a wrist. Jason didn't say thank you. He didn't hug me. He just snatched the papers and walked out the door. Sarah sat beside me, frozen, her face pale. You didn't have to, Mom. He's gone too far. I know, I whispered, staring at the empty doorway. It was the first time in my life I had ever feared my own child, and it was the last time I would ever believe he would change. The silence that followed Jason's departure was the kind that sinks deep into your bones. It wasn't peaceful. It wasn't quiet in the comforting way. It was the kind of silence that buzzes behind your ears, pressing down on your chest, making it hard to breathe. I sat at the kitchen table long after he left, staring at the spot where the pen had touched the paper. My name, Linda Parker, now written in blue ink on a document that gave away the last piece of my life I thought I still controlled. Sarah didn't speak for a long time either. She just sat across from me, her hands clenched so tight her knuckles turned white. It was almost midnight before she said anything. You shouldn't have done that. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't even disappointed. It was small, broken. I looked at her and tried to smile. He would have hurt you, or me, or himself. Ah, and now? She asked. What happens now? I didn't have an answer. For days after that night, Jason didn't return. He didn't call, not even a text. And to be honest, I wasn't sure whether to be relieved or afraid. Each time I heard tires crunching gravel outside, my stomach knotted. Each knock at the door made my heart skip, but it was never him. It was usually Thomas Reed checking in, or a neighbor bringing over a casserole, because the whole block somehow already knew something terrible had happened. In small towns, the walls have ears, and even secrets carried in whispers travel faster than the wind. My health, already fragile, began to decline. I stopped sleeping. My hands trembled when I tried to do the simplest things: boil water, fold laundry, brush my hair. Sarah noticed right away. She started staying the night more often, sometimes even sleeping on the old couch, with her coat still on. Mom, she said one morning as she handed me my heart medication, you can't keep holding this in. It's eating you alive. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I was fine, but I'd lied to her too many times already. I failed him, I said instead. Somewhere along the way, I must have done something wrong. Sarah knelt beside my chair. You didn't fail him. He failed himself. End of Tua. But I made excuses, covered for him, gave him everything. I thought if I just loved him enough. She reached for my hand. Mom, love isn't what broke Jason. His choices did. You did everything you could. Her words should have comforted me. But all they did was make me cry. Because there's no pain quite like watching your own child become the very thing you feared most. After a week passed, we learned through someone in town that Jason had sold the land, our land, to a private investor from Des Moines. It was fast, ruthless. He barely got half its value. Sarah was livid. He didn't even try to hold on to it. He just flipped it for cash. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. What was the point in screaming at the wind? Thomas Reed came by the next day with 2 cups of coffee and a look on his face I'd seen only once before at my husband's funeral. I heard about the sale, he said quietly. I'm sorry, Linda. Unearthed. Thank you. You know, he continued, when my father passed, he left us a single acre out by the river. It wasn't much, but it meant something. I still remember how it felt walking that land with him when I was a boy. That land held our family stories. Yours did too. His voice cracked a little. You don't just lose property, you lose a piece of your name. I knew what he meant. There were spots on that land where Jason had built forts out of scrap wood, where Sarah used to chase butterflies, where my husband had once planted apple trees only for the deer to eat every last one. And now, it belonged to strangers. I sat on the porch that night, wrapped in an old quilt, trying not to think. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked. Then I heard footsteps. I looked up, hopeful. But it wasn't Jason. It was Sarah, coming back from the store. I got more of your tea, she said, holding up the bag. The chamomile one you like? I nodded, forcing a smile. She sat beside me and said nothing for a while. Then softly, you know, I've been looking into something. I turned toward her. What do you mean? There's a legal path to contest the transfer. Maybe not to get the land back, but to investigate whether he coerced you, especially with the threat. If we have witnesses. Sarah, I began, but she held up a hand. I'm not saying we have to go to court. I'm just saying I don't want him to get away with this. You didn't just sign it willingly. You were terrified. I looked out at the dark yard. You think a court would care? That anyone would understand? I care, she said. That's enough to try. I didn't answer, because deep down, a part of me still wanted to protect Jason, as broken as he was. But the other part, the part that had looked into his eyes and seen no love, no remorse, that part was beginning to harden. I used to believe that a mother's heart could stretch without limits, that it could break and mend, over and over, no matter how many times her children let her down. But that belief, like so many others I carried, had started to unravel. In the days following Jason's betrayal, the house grew unbearably quiet, not the soft kind of silence that soothes the soul, but the heavy kind that settles in your chest and won't let go. The kind that hums behind your ears and reminds you with every breath that something is missing and it may never come back. I moved through the house like a ghost. I cooked meals I didn't eat, folded clothes I hadn't worn. I'd find myself staring at the same spot on the wall for what felt like hours, only to blink and realize the sun had gone down. Sarah was there most nights now. She'd bring takeout and sit beside me on the couch, trying to keep the conversation going while I nodded politely. But my mind was elsewhere, stuck on a loop, replaying that moment in the kitchen. His voice, that knife, my signature. The land was gone. Just like that. Jason had wasted no time. Within days, he sold it to a faceless developer from Des Moines for a fraction of what it was worth. The papers came in the mail, an official notice from the county office. My hands trembled so hard, I couldn't even open the envelope. Sarah had to read it for me. He didn't just sell it, Mom, she said softly. He signed over the mineral rights, too. They're going to flatten everything, build condos. My vision blurred. All I could picture were the trees my husband had planted, the ones that never quite grew right, but still stood there like sentinels of memory. I pictured the backyard where Jason once played with his dog, the old rope swing Sarah used to love. Gone. I felt like I was unraveling from the inside out, but Sarah wasn't falling apart. She rose. I'd never seen that side of her before. Quiet but firm. Grief channeled into purpose. She started making calls. First to a lawyer, then to a social worker, then to a legal aid clinic in town that dealt with elder financial abuse. He coerced you, she told me one evening as she spread out documents across the dining table. That counts. You didn't sign those papers of your own free will. I shook my head. He didn't hurt me. Mom, he threatened you, with a knife. There are laws for this. But I wasn't thinking about the law. I was thinking about Jason, about the way he used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms when he was 5, the way he used to bring me dandelions and say they were golden flowers. Devon, how does a mother reconcile the child she raised with the man he became? That question haunted me, and just when the air started to settle, when I'd managed to take a full breath without crying, he came back. It was a cold Tuesday afternoon, barely a week after he'd sold the land. The sky was steel gray, and snow threatened the horizon. I was sitting in the living room, sipping tea Sarah had made, when I heard the front gate creak. Then came a knock, tentative, but unmistakable. I didn't get up. I couldn't. My legs felt like stone. Sarah went to the door. I heard her voice first, sharp and protective. "What are you doing here?" Jason's reply was low, slurred. "I just want to talk to Mom." Sarah stepped into the room a moment later, face flushed. "He's drunk," she muttered, "and he's not coming in." But before she could close the door, Jason stumbled past her. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Hollow cheeks, chapped lips, dark circles under his eyes. His coat was dirty. One of his boots was untied. "Mom," he said, almost pleading, "can I just sit for a minute?" I said nothing, just stared at him. He took it as permission and sank into the recliner opposite me. "I'm sorry," he mumbled. "I didn't mean for things to get so bad." "You didn't mean to threaten me?" I asked. My voice was cold, steadier than I expected. He rubbed his face. "I wasn't going to hurt you. I needed you to take me seriously. You held a knife. It was just for show." I cut him off. "There's nothing just about that, Jason." He looked up, his eyes glassy. "I'm out of money. They took everything. The guys I owed, some of them weren't bluffing. I thought I'd have more time. I didn't think they'd come after me so fast." "What do you want now?" I asked, though I already knew. "Just a place to crash. A couple of nights. I'll be out of your hair soon." Before I could answer, Sarah stepped in front of me. "Number." Jason scoffed. "Not your house." "It used to be hers," Sarah snapped, "until you took it." Jason looked at me. "Mom, come on." I stared at him for a long time. And for the first time in my life, I didn't see my son. I saw a man who had broken into his own mother's life and ransacked it. A man who would never stop taking unless someone finally said no. "No," I said quietly. He blinked. "What?" "You can't stay here. You need help. But not the kind I can give you anymore." "Sight." His face twisted with disbelief. "You're really turning me away?" Tears welled up in my eyes, but I didn't look away. I should have done it a long time ago. He stood, knocking over the coffee table in the process. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "After everything, you're the one cutting me off?" Sarah took a step forward. "Get out, Jason, now." He stormed out without another word. The door slammed, and then silence. Not the heavy, grief-filled silence of before. This was different. This was relief. Sarah looked at me, eyes searching. "Are you okay?" I nodded slowly. "Number. But I will be." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, as I often did. But something had shifted. I felt pain, yes, but I also felt a strange sort of clarity. For the first time, I began to believe that Jason's path was no longer mine to follow. That love doesn't mean enabling. That protecting myself wasn't selfish. And somewhere, deep in the quiet, I felt the first threads of peace begin to weave through the wreckage. I thought saying no to Jason would be the hardest part, and in many ways it was. But what followed was harder still, waking up each day and standing by that no. There's something strange about strength. When you're young, it feels loud, like slamming doors and raised voices. But as you grow older, strength becomes quieter. It lives in stillness, in choosing not to answer when anger bangs at your door, in keeping your voice steady when your heart wants to shatter. After Jason left that last time, I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't even shake. He just stood still. Sarah sat beside me on the porch the next morning, bundled in her scarf and winter coat. The November air had turned sharp. Frost clung to the tips of the grass like powdered glass. "You did the right thing," she said gently. "I know," I replied. "I just wish it didn't feel so wrong." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than you think." Was I? I didn't feel strong. My body was aching more than usual, my joints stiff in the cold, my chest tight from too many sleepless nights. But something deep inside, something quiet and steady, had started to rise. That day, I called the lawyer again. "I'm ready to move forward," I told her. With everything, we filed a petition to challenge the property transfer. I had to relive every moment, the threats, the knife, the signature. I had to admit, under oath, that I'd been afraid of my own son. Sarah sat through every meeting. She took notes, asked questions I wouldn't have thought to ask. She never pushed me too hard, never made me feel small for wavering. She just held the line when I couldn't. And Thomas Reed, dear old Thomas, came by with a letter in hand. I wrote a statement, he said. Saw the whole thing through the window. Didn't want to intervene at the time. But, well, that was a mistake. I want to help set it right. His handwriting was shaky, but his words were sharp. He described Jason's aggression, the fear on my face, the way Sarah ran into the room just in time. I cried when I read it. Not just for the memory, but for the kindness. Not everyone was so kind. At the grocery store, a few neighbors averted their eyes. Others whispered behind their carts. One woman, someone I'd once exchanged casserole recipes with, gave me a long, pitying look and said, "It's a shame. What's happened to your boy? But really, Linda, how did you let it get that far?" I didn't answer, not because I didn't have words, but because none of them would have been enough. They hadn't lived in my skin. They hadn't watched a son transform, piece by piece, into someone they no longer recognized. Back home, I looked out at the spot where the trees used to stand, where Jason once helped me rake leaves, where he and Sarah had played tag until the sun dipped below the trees. Now it was flattened, marked with surveyors' flags and temporary fencing. But a few days later, something unexpected happened. "My lawyer called. There's a delay," she said. "The buyers haven't finalized construction permits. There's a chance if we can prove coercion in court, they may be willing to void the sale entirely rather than risk bad press." I nearly dropped the phone. "A chance?" I repeated. "It's slim," she warned, "but it's there, and it's real." I hung up and sat in silence for a long time, letting that word settle into my chest. Chance. It wasn't certainty, but it wasn't defeat either. When Sarah came home, I told her everything. She didn't cry. She smiled. "Then we fight," she said simply. Every inch of the way. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. I dreamed of wildflowers, of Sunday dinners, of laughter around the fire pit in the backyard. I dreamed of peace, not just the absence of pain, but the presence of something better. The road ahead would be long. I knew that. Jason might fight back. He might deny everything. But I had truth. I had Sarah. I had people like Thomas. And more than that, I had myself older, wiser, scarred, but no longer afraid. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was beginning to live. I always thought the worst part of parenting was watching your child get hurt. But I was wrong. The worst part is realizing that the person hurting them is themselves, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. The day our petition was officially filed in court, something in me shifted. It wasn't a loud moment. There was no big speech or announcement. Just a click of the send button on Sarah's laptop, followed by silence. We sat there for a long time, not saying a word. The screen glowed in front of us like a signal flare in the dark. "It's done," Sarah said finally. I nodded, staring at the screen. "Are you okay?" she asked. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to be the strong one for once. But all I could do was whisper, "I don't know." Because the truth was, I felt like I had crossed a threshold I couldn't come back from. Filing that petition meant I had named my son my own flesh and blood as someone who had manipulated, threatened, and stolen from me. And not just privately, not within the family. No, this was public now. Legal. On the record. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept walking through the house, turning off lights that weren't on, checking locks I had already checked. My mind couldn't rest. The next morning, I woke up to find Sarah in the kitchen, typing furiously on her laptop. She'd taken time off work, saying her students would be fine for a few days. I knew she was worried about me. "I made a list," she said when I sat down at the table. "A list of what?" "People we can call. Witnesses. Neighbors. Anyone who saw or heard what happened that night." I blinked. "You really think people will talk?" She looked up at me, eyes calm but resolute. "They'll talk, Mom. You've lived here your whole life. People know you. They've seen Jason spiral. They just need someone to be brave enough to speak first." And so we began. We started with Mr. Thomas Reed. He didn't hesitate. "I've got eyes, Linda. he said. "I saw that boy of yours storm out of your house with those papers. I saw your face when you opened the door. That wasn't just a bad day. That was fear. And if you need me to say that under oath, I will." He even wrote a statement neatly typed on his old typewriter, signed in blue ink. Others weren't so brave. Some shook their heads, said it wasn't their business. A few looked at me with pity, others with silent judgment. One woman, a former friend from church, patted my arm and said, "Sometimes kids lose their way. We just have to pray, Linda." But this wasn't about prayer anymore. It was about truth. Jason didn't show up right away. For a week, he disappeared again. We heard rumors he'd been spotted at a bar in Waterloo, then crashing at someone's trailer outside town. Sarah kept a folder of everything, sightings, receipts, anything that might support our case. Then, on a Sunday morning, he came back. It was early. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft gold light through the kitchen window. I was making tea when I heard the front gate creak. I looked through the window. It was him. Jason. He looked rough. His coat was unzipped, his shoes muddy. His eyes, bloodshot and glassy, met mine through the glass. "Mom," he said when I opened the door, "can we talk?" I didn't invite him in. I stood in the doorway, holding the frame with one hand like it might help keep me steady. "I heard about the petition," he said, "about court, about everything." I didn't respond. He shifted his weight. "You really think I'm a criminal?" I finally spoke. "I think you scared me. I think you used me. I think you crossed a line I never thought you would." He let out a bitter laugh. "All this over a piece of land?" "It wasn't just land," I said. "It was our home. It was your father's legacy. It was trust." Jason's face hardened. "So what, you're dragging me into court? What do you expect to get out of it?" "Maybe nothing," I said honestly. "But at least the truth will be spoken. I'm not going to let silence protect you anymore." He looked like he wanted to argue, but something in my face must have stopped him. He turned to go, then paused. This isn't going to end well for you, Mom." "Oh." I closed the door before he could finish the threat. Sarah came downstairs seconds later. She must have heard everything. She wrapped her arms around me, and for once, I let myself lean into her. The hearing date came faster than I expected. We received the notice by mail. The 14th of December, 9 a.m., County Courthouse. I stared at the letter for a long time, fingers resting gently on the seal. Thomas Reed drove us to town that afternoon. I needed air, and he insisted on treating us to lunch. We sat at a booth in a small diner near Main Street, the kind of place where everyone knew your name and your business. People glanced our way. Some smiled kindly. Others didn't. "Let them look," Thomas said, buttering his biscuit. "You're doing something most people would never have the guts to do." Sarah smiled. "She's stronger than she thinks." Thomas leaned across the table and looked me dead in the eye. "She always was." I looked out the window at the courthouse across the street. It stood tall and clean, with white columns and wide steps. In 2 weeks, I would walk through those doors and tell a judge what had happened. I would say my son threatened me, that he took from me, that he betrayed the very heart that gave him life. And I would not look away, because silence no longer protected anyone. And I was no longer afraid of being seen. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the creaks of the old house, the hum of the refrigerator down the hall. Sarah had offered to sleep in my room, just in case I woke up anxious. I told her I'd be fine. I wasn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, Jason, holding that knife. Not high in the air, not in rage, but low, steady, calculated. That was the part that haunted me most. I'd known fear before, when my husband got sick, when the bank account got low, when Sarah broke her arm falling off the back porch, but nothing like this. Nothing like being afraid of your own child. I rose at dawn, dressed in my best navy blue coat and the pearl earrings I hadn't worn since my husband's funeral. Sarah made coffee, but I couldn't touch it. My stomach was full of stones. Thomas Reed pulled into the driveway at exactly 7:30. His old Ford truck rumbled like an aging dog, loyal and loud. "You ready?" he asked when we stepped out. "No," I said honestly, "but I'm going anyway." The courthouse loomed larger than I remembered. Big white columns, polished stone steps. We walked up slowly, me, Sarah, and Thomas, like 3 soldiers, reporting for a war we never wanted. Inside, everything was cold and echoing. People shuffled papers. A man coughed. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried. Our case was number 3 on the docket. I sat on the hard bench outside the courtroom and stared at the floor. Then the door opened, and I saw him. Jason, my son. He walked in wearing a wrinkled blazer, one I didn't recognize. His hair was combed back, his face clean-shaven. But he looked tired. Not just physically, but worn down, in a way I couldn't explain. He didn't look at me. Not once. His lawyer, a young man in a too-sharp suit, sat beside him and flipped through a folder. Jason nodded, scribbled something, nodded again, as if this were just business. Our hearing was called at 9:12 a.m. The courtroom smelled faintly of wood polish and paper. The judge was a tall woman with kind eyes, but her expression gave away nothing. My lawyer opened with the facts, the coercion, the forged paperwork, the threat with the weapon. Then she called me to the stand. My legs felt like jelly as I walked to the witness box. I swore an oath, sat down, and tried to keep my hands from shaking. Mrs. Parker, my lawyer began gently, can you describe what happened on the evening of the 28th of October? I nodded. And then I spoke. I spoke about the knife, about his words, about the way he looked at me, not like a son, but like a desperate man cornered by his own bad choices. I spoke about the fear, about the pain, about the sound of the pen scratching against the paper. I didn't cry. Not once. My voice cracked once or twice, but I didn't let it break. When I finished, the room was silent. Then Jason's lawyer stood. Mrs. Parker, he said, isn't it true that you've given your son money voluntarily in the past? Yes. And that you have a history of forgiving his debts? Yes. So, what makes this time different? I looked at Jason. He finally met my eyes. Just for a second. This time, I said, he brought a knife. The lawyer shifted. You weren't injured, correct? Number. And you signed the papers of your own hand? I did, because I thought if I didn't, my daughter or I might not make it out of that kitchen. That answer settled into the room like thunder. Next, Sarah took the stand. She spoke clearly, emotionally, about what she saw, what she heard, and the fear that followed. She talked about the changes in me, the shaking hands, the silence, the depression. Then came Thomas Reed. He was blunt, unapologetic. I've lived next to that family for over 30 years, he said, and I've watched that boy waste himself piece by piece. That night, I saw a mother broken, and I saw a man who didn't care one damn bit. Jason never looked up, not even once. When it was over, the judge said she would review the evidence and set a second hearing in 2 weeks to determine whether the property transfer could be reversed. It wasn't a verdict, not yet, but it was a beginning. Outside, I stood on the courthouse steps, letting the winter air bite at my cheeks. Sarah wrapped an arm around me. You did it, Mom. No, I said softly. We did it, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something real. Not peace, not yet, but strength. The kind that comes from telling the truth, even when it costs you everything. They say grief comes in waves. I used to think that meant crying in the middle of the night or stumbling across an old photo and feeling your chest collapse. But grief, I've learned, can also look like a quiet afternoon, a full sink of dishes, a voicemail you don't return. It's not always about what's lost. Sometimes, it's about what never was. After the hearing, I didn't cry. Not even once. But I felt hollow like a house that had been emptied out and swept clean, but still carried the smell of smoke. Jason hadn't said a word to me during the trial. Not a glance, not a sigh, not even contempt. Just blankness. And somehow, that cut deeper than the knife ever had. It was as if I didn't exist anymore. As if our 35 years of life together had evaporated with one court date and a handful of testimony. I feel like I lost him again, I said to Sarah the next day, as we sat in the sunroom, watching the trees shake in the wind. You didn't lose him, Mom, she said gently. He gave himself away a long time ago. I nodded, but the ache didn't fade. Sarah poured me more tea and sat beside me without another word. She knew there were no right things to say, only presence, only patience. A few days later, a letter arrived. Thick paper, unfamiliar handwriting. It was from Jason's lawyer. I held it in my hands for a long time before opening it. Something in my gut told me it wouldn't be good. Inside was a formal proposal, a settlement. Jason was offering to voluntarily reverse the deed transfer if I agreed to sign a confidentiality agreement. No public statement, no further legal action, no admission of wrongdoing on his part. In other words, I could get my land back, but I'd have to pretend none of it ever happened. No justice. No truth. Just a transaction. I set the letter down slowly. Sarah picked it up and scanned it, her brow furrowing. "He's buying silence," she said, plain and simple. I didn't respond, because part of me, God help me, was tempted. The land, the trees, the backyard, my home. It could all come back, just like that. No more court, no more whispers in town, no more facing Jason in a courtroom, reliving that night over and over again. Just sign and forget. That night, I sat out on the porch in my old rocking chair and stared at the moon. I thought about my husband, how proud he was of that property, how he mowed the lawn in perfect stripes, how he used to say, "We don't own this land, Linda. We're just keeping it safe for the next generation." Would he have taken the deal? Would he have told me to let it go? Or would he have reminded me that silence, too, has a price? The next morning, I went to see Thomas. He was out back, pruning the rose bushes, even though it was too cold for them to bloom. "You look like a woman with a hard choice," he said without looking up. I handed him the letter. He read it slowly, his lips tightening. "So he wants to wipe the slate clean," he muttered. "No scars, no story, just a reset." I nodded. He looked at me. "Linda, I'm going to say something I probably shouldn't, but you've earned it." I braced myself. "You've spent your whole life protecting him, even when he didn't deserve it. But if you take this deal, you're not just protecting him anymore. You're protecting every man like him, every kid who thinks they can take and never answer for it." My throat tightened. "I don't care if you win in court," he continued, "but don't you dare let him walk away clean." I left without saying much, but I knew what I had to do. That night, I called the lawyer. "I'm rejecting the settlement," I said. My voice didn't shake. She paused. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. If we lose, we lose. But we lose fighting." I hung up, sat back in my chair, and let the silence wash over me. Not the silence of fear, not the silence of shame, but the silence that comes after a decision. A silence that feels honest. Sarah came in later, her arms full of grocery bags. I helped her unpack. We didn't talk about the letter. We didn't need to. That night, I slept. Not deeply, not peacefully, but I slept. And when I woke up, I didn't feel hollow. I felt ready. The second time I walked into that courthouse, I felt different. The fear hadn't vanished, but it had settled, hardened into something more solid. Purpose. This time, I wore the same navy blue coat, the same pearl earrings. Not because I had nothing else to wear, but because they reminded me of who I was before all this. Before my own child, made me doubt my place in the world. The courtroom was fuller this time. A reporter from the Cedar Rapids Gazette was there, scribbling notes. A few unfamiliar faces in the back row. Even the court clerk seemed more alert, aware that something heavier than a property dispute was unfolding. Jason sat beside his lawyer again. His face looked tighter, his mouth a hard line. He didn't look at me. The judge opened with a few formal statements, then asked both sides to confirm they had not reached a settlement. My lawyer stood. "That is correct, Your Honor. Mrs. Parker has rejected all settlement offers and wishes to proceed." Jason's lawyer stood too, his voice clipped. "We maintain that the original deed transfer was signed voluntarily and with full understanding of the terms." The judge nodded. "Very well, let's proceed." The next few hours blurred into witness testimony and document reviews. Sarah was called again. So was Thomas Reed. But the moment that changed everything came when my lawyer asked to submit a recording. I hadn't known about it. It was a voicemail, left by Jason 2 nights after the first court hearing. "Mom," his voice rasped from the speaker, piped through the courtroom sound system. "You know you can make this all go away. Just say it was a misunderstanding. Say I was just scared. I'll give the land back. You don't need to ruin me over this." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Do you have the call log to confirm the origin?" "Yes, Your Honor," the lawyer said, handing over the documentation. Jason's lawyer objected. "Your Honor, that recording wasn't disclosed." The judge held up a hand. "You'll have a chance to respond." I looked at Jason. For a brief moment, his composure cracked. He rubbed his temples. His leg bounced beneath the table. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Parker, is this the first time you're hearing that voicemail?" I nodded. "Yes. Sarah must have saved it. I deleted mine." Sarah gave me a small, apologetic shrug from her seat. The judge exhaled. "Let's recess for 10 minutes. I want to review this in chambers." The gavel came down. The room stirred. We filed out into the hallway, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something warm bloom in my chest. Not hope exactly, not yet, but proximity to it. Jason passed by me as he left the courtroom. For the first time, he looked at me. His eyes were glassy. Maybe it was anger, maybe shame, maybe just exhaustion. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he murmured. "I know," I replied, "but you still made it go." He didn't respond. When we returned, the judge had a different tone. "We've heard significant evidence that suggests the transfer may not have been conducted in good faith. Given the recording and witness testimony, I am pausing the proceedings for 1 week to allow both parties to submit final arguments. A decision will follow shortly after." She looked directly at Jason. "Mr. Parker, this court takes accusations of coercion seriously. Consider carefully how you wish to proceed." Jason sank a little lower in his seat. The gavel fell again. It wasn't over, but it was close. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like maybe, just maybe, the truth had found its voice. A week feels like a long time when you're waiting for something you can't control. The court had given us 7 days to prepare closing statements, to submit final thoughts, documents, or witness addendums. But I knew deep down that the next time I stepped into that courthouse, it wouldn't just be about the land. It would be about my soul. Sarah was laser-focused. She met with the lawyer every evening, reviewed papers until midnight, paced the living room reading statute after statute. I watched her, grateful and heavy-hearted. She shouldn't have had to carry all this. One night, I found her asleep at the kitchen table, her head resting on a stack of affidavits. I covered her with a quilt and sat beside her, staring at the darkness outside the window. That's when the memory came. Jason at age 7. It was a snowy December, not unlike now. He'd spent all morning building a snowman in the front yard. When he finished, he ran inside, nose red, hands freezing, but beaming with pride. "Mom, come see," he shouted. "I gave him your scarf so he'd be warm." I remember laughing, wrapping my arms around him, thinking, this is all I need in the world. I clung to that memory like a warm ember in a cold room, but it made everything harder. 2 days before the final hearing, Jason's lawyer sent over another letter, another offer. This one wasn't just about reversing the deed. It included a personal apology, restitution for legal fees, and a public statement admitting some degree of coercion. It wasn't perfect, but it was close. My lawyer looked hopeful. Even Sarah raised an eyebrow. But I couldn't say yes. Not yet. Because what Jason was trying to do wasn't just fix paperwork. He was trying to erase the story. Smooth it over. Seal it behind a legal stamp so it could never be spoken again. And I wasn't ready to do that. "I want to speak," I told the lawyer the next morning. "At the final hearing, in my own words." She paused. "That's unusual, but it's your right." So I sat down at the dining table with a pen and a yellow legal pad and began to write. At first, the words came slowly, but then they poured out. All the nights I stayed up waiting for Jason to come home. All the times I loaned him money, made excuses for him, covered for him. All the ways I lied to Sarah, to myself, to the neighbors. How I confused love with sacrifice. How I didn't realize until it was almost too late that saving someone too many times can teach them they don't have to save themselves. I wrote until my hand cramped. Then I folded the pages, placed them inside my Bible, and went to bed. Sleep didn't come easy. It never really does anymore. But for once, my dreams were quiet. And when I woke the next morning, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. Not for revenge. Not for some grand moment of justice. But for truth. The kind that doesn't always heal, but always sets you free. The final hearing fell on a Thursday morning. Cold, overcast. The kind of day where the sun never quite rises. I stood at the mirror that morning longer than usual. Not to check my hair or makeup, I barely wore any these days, but just to look at myself. 69 years stared back. Lines around the mouth, crow's feet near the eyes. But there was strength in that reflection too. Not the kind that shouts, the kind that endures. Sarah drove us in silence. She held my hand at a red light, her thumb gently brushing my knuckles. Neither of us spoke. We didn't have to. The courtroom was packed. Word had spread. Neighbors, church folks, even the local news sat near the back, notebooks and cameras ready. Jason was already there. He looked older. Not just from stress, but from something deeper, like someone who'd been hollowed out. When our case was called, I walked forward with the pages I'd written folded neatly in my coat pocket. The judge began with opening remarks, thanked both parties for their cooperation, then turned to my lawyer. "We understand Mrs. Parker would like to make a personal statement?" My lawyer nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge gestured toward the stand. I stood. Slowly. Carefully. Each step felt like a lifetime. But when I reached the front of the courtroom and looked out, I didn't see strangers. I saw a town I'd fed, taught, prayed with. I saw the girl who used to babysit Sarah, the couple from down the road who lent us tools in the spring. I saw people who had watched me fall and were now waiting to see if I would rise. I unfolded the papers with steady hands. And then I spoke. "My name is Linda Parker. Most of you know me as a mother, a neighbor, a widow. You may have heard parts of this story, whispers, newspaper headlines, courtroom summaries, but I'd like to tell you my version, the full one. I raised my son Jason with love, the same kind of love my mother gave me, firm but gentle, honest but forgiving. When his father died, Jason was only 19, and I tried to be both parents at once. I worked extra hours. I skipped meals. I made it my mission to make sure he never felt the loss as deeply as I did. I failed, not because I didn't love him, but because sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes love turns into enabling, into excuses, into a quiet kind of self-erasure. I paid Jason's debts. I answered his late-night calls. I stood between him and the consequences more times than I can count. Until one day, he came into my kitchen with a knife, not to kill me, not even, I believed, to hurt me, but to frighten me, to make me feel that the only way to stay safe was to give him what he wanted. That's not just coercion. That's betrayal. And still, I didn't stop loving him. Because here's what nobody tells you about being a mother. Your heart doesn't come with an off switch, even when it breaks, even when your child looks at you like you're just a signature on a page. I didn't bring this case to punish my son. I brought it to protect myself, to protect what's left of my life, my dignity, my name. I brought it because silence would have been another kind of death. I stand here not as a victim, but as a woman who finally, after 69 years, decided she was worth saving. And I hope, if there's anyone else sitting in this room who feels trapped by love, by guilt, by history, you know that you are too. When I finished, I folded the pages and sat down. The courtroom was silent. Even Jason didn't move. The judge took a long pause. Then she leaned forward. "Thank you, Mrs. Parker. That was deeply human." She turned to the room. "This court finds sufficient evidence that the transfer of property was not conducted with full consent and that undue emotional pressure was applied. As such, the deed shall be reversed and returned to Mrs. Linda Parker immediately." The gavel came down. The room stirred. Sarah squeezed my hand so tightly I thought she might never let go. People nodded. Some clapped quietly. Thomas Reed wiped his eye with a wrinkled handkerchief. Jason stood motionless. He didn't yell. He didn't protest. He simply gathered his things, nodded once in the judge's direction, and walked out. I didn't follow him, because this time I wasn't the one responsible for chasing him back to the light. I had done my part. I had told the truth. And sometimes, that has to be enough. I thought that when the court returned the deed to my name, I would feel something close to joy. Not fireworks or music, but at least a quiet kind of satisfaction. Instead, all I felt was tired in a way that sleep doesn't fix. The land was back in my name. The house, too. No one could take it from me again, not without a fight, and now the whole town knew that I was capable of one. But that didn't change what had already been taken. You can reclaim property. You can't reclaim trust. Jason hadn't come back. Not even a phone call, not a message. He'd vanished like mist off the river in early spring. One day he was here, the next he was nowhere. His lawyer had sent one final document. Confirmation that the transfer was reversed, the sale was nullified, and Jason had forfeited any claim to the land. There was no apology in the letter, no explanation, just legalese, neat and final. I guess that's it, Sarah had said quietly, folding the papers and tucking them away in the family cabinet. But it didn't feel like it. It felt like a slow unraveling. The days after the verdict were cold and gray. Winter crept in with a kind of quiet that settled into the bones. The land behind the house was muddy and bare, flattened by machines that had started work before the lawsuit halted them. The grass was torn, the garden fence broken. The outline of the old maple tree, once strong and wide and crooked with age, was now just a stump, sawed clean across the middle. "Looks like a scar," I whispered one morning as I stood at the edge of the yard, looking at it. Sarah turned to me, rubbing her gloved hands together. "Then let's plant something near it. We don't cover scars, we grow beside them." That afternoon, we drove to a local nursery. Most of the trees had been pulled for the season, but there was one little sapling left, a red maple. Bare branches, thin trunk, roots wrapped in burlap. "We'll take her," I said. The man behind the counter smiled, then leaned forward. "We're all glad you stood your ground, Mrs. Parker." I nodded, unsure how to respond. I wasn't used to people saying that to me. We planted the tree near the stump. It wasn't a replacement, it couldn't be. But it was something alive in the ground again. That mattered. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out a notebook. Blue cover, a little frayed at the edges, lined paper, untouched. I started writing. Not for court. Not for anyone else. Just to empty my chest. I wrote about Jason. About the way he used to sing in the car, off-key and loud. About the time he tried to build a treehouse and fell, breaking his arm, and how he refused to cry until we got to the hospital. I wrote about the good, the soft, the things I still missed. But I also wrote about the other parts. The nights I didn't sleep, waiting to hear if he'd come home alive. The way he'd look through me when he wanted money. The tone of his voice when he told me I owed him. I wrote until my fingers ached. Then I set the pen down, folded the page, and slipped it into the drawer beneath the stove. Some truths don't need to be read. They just need to be said. Sarah came in late with groceries. She'd picked up extra flowers, tulip bulbs, lavender, daisies. "I thought we'd start a new bed this spring," she said. "We'll dig up that patch by the fence." I smiled. I liked the sound of that. The next morning, I found something strange on the porch. A small envelope. No name, just the word, Mom. Inside was a folded scrap of paper. On it, in Jason's unmistakable handwriting, "I don't expect forgiveness, but I'm sorry for what I became. I hope the land grows again." That was all. I read it once. Twice. Then I pressed it between the pages of my Bible next to my husband's funeral program. Not because it healed anything, but because it was real. And sometimes, that's enough. The neighborhood changed. Slowly. People started waving again. The woman who used to run the flower stand stopped by with muffins and a quiet hug. The pastor from church sent a card. Thomas Reed came by with an old spade and said, "I figure you're about due for a fresh planting season." I wasn't whole. I wasn't over it. But I was present. Each morning, I sat on the porch with my tea, notebook on my lap, and watched the wind stir the new maple's branches. It was small, bare, still learning. But it was growing. And so was I. If you'd asked me 5 years ago what my life would look like at 69, I would have said quiet. Maybe a little gardening, a few church bake sales, photos of grandchildren taped to the fridge. Instead, I stood in a courtroom. Instead, I signed my name again this time, not to give something away, but to take something back. This isn't the story I ever imagined telling. But it's mine now. And if you're listening, if you followed me all the way to this point, I want to say something not as a victim, not as a fighter, not even as a mother. Just as a woman who loved deeply, gave too much, lost what couldn't be bought. And finally learned to stop apologizing for surviving. I used to believe that love meant never giving up on someone, that if you just held on tight enough, long enough, they'd come back. But I was wrong. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone fall. And sometimes the person you need to stop giving up on is yourself. I look back now, and I don't hate Jason. I'm not angry, not in the way I used to be. What I feel is more complicated. A kind of quiet mourning for the son I once knew. A deep sadness for the man he became. And a strange, flickering hope that somewhere, someday, he might build something good with the broken pieces he carries. But that's not my work anymore. That belongs to him. People still ask me if I regret taking him to court, if I regret saying those things out loud. Putting my family's shame in front of the whole town, I tell them the truth. I don't regret it, because silence never protected me. It only protected the story I told myself that I could handle it, that I deserved it, that maybe, if I just gave him one more chance, it would all turn around. But pain doesn't disappear just because we're polite. And enabling isn't the same as kindness. There's a difference between loving someone and letting them destroy you. It took me nearly 70 years to learn that. I hope you learn it sooner. I still live in the same house. The kitchen window still sticks in the corner. The floor still creaks near the pantry. The wind still howls through the chimney in January. But something feels different now. Lighter, as if the house itself has exhaled. Sarah is still here most weekends. We plant things. We cook, we laugh. She doesn't ask about Jason much. And I don't volunteer. We both know some wounds don't scab over. They just learn to live in the air. Sometimes I write him letters I never send. Sometimes I picture him on a porch somewhere far away, reading my words in his own mind, even if he never opens an envelope. Sometimes I just sit with the ache. And sometimes I don't. Last week, I planted 2 rose bushes by the new maple tree. One for the past, one for what might still bloom. When the wind moves through the branches, I imagine it whispering all the things I never got to say. I'm sorry. I love you. And I'm still standing. If you've been through something like this, maybe your ending looks different. Maybe it's messier, or keter, or hasn't come yet. But I want to tell you this. You are not weak for hoping. You are not cruel for stopping. And you are not alone. We don't get to choose how our stories begin. But we sure as hell get to choose how they end. And this is how mine ends. On my land. With my name. With roots in the ground. And peace in my chest. The kettle whistles at 7:04 a.m. Like always, I pour the hot water into my old porcelain cup, the one with the faded roses around the rim, and stir in a spoon of honey. No cream. Just like he used to drink it. Outside, the sky is still half asleep. Pale blue with streaks of silver. September's breath lingers on the window, soft and cool. I push open the kitchen window. It sticks, then gives. The hinges groan like they always have. And then I hear it. A single chirp. Then another. I step out onto the porch, cup in hand, wrapped in my cardigan. The one Sarah knit for me after the court case ended. In the yard, the red maple stands taller than before. And there, on one of the youngest branches, perches a small bird. Chest puffed, head tilted, singing like it's announcing something to the whole world. It flits away after a few seconds, but the moment stays. Beneath the tree, the soil looks darker, richer, like it's remembering how to breathe again. Sarah appears in the garden, wearing her wide-brimmed hat. She waves a trowel in the air. "Mom, I was thinking we should fix up the old chicken coop. Maybe try growing squash next season." I smile. I don't answer right away, just sip my tea and watch the light fall across the porch. The fence is still broken in places. The paint on the shed still peels. But there's time now. Time to mend. Time to plant. Time to let things grow. For the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm bracing for something. I just am. And that's enough. I didn't win. I reclaimed. What did you feel while listening to this story all the way through? If it touched your heart, leave the #1 inch the comments. If you didn't feel connected to it, feel free to write 0. Every piece of feedback means a lot to me, because it's thanks to you that I can keep going. It's from your responses that I draw the energy to tell the next chapter a new story is coming, even deeper, even more moving. And I truly hope you'll be there to listen with me.